Henry boarded the train with $200 in his pocket. It didn't seem dangerous to him, just a friendly card game with strangers. A harmless risk, he thought. Joe felt the same way. He had a wife waiting at home, but a few drinks at the bar blurred his judgment. Someone smiled at him, paid attention, stayed close, and that was enough. There's an old word for people who fall into traps like these. We call them suckers. While some people drift through life unguarded, others spend their nights carefully planning how to take advantage of them. Take Mike, for example. Young, healthy, employed, surrounded by opportunity. He lives in a country with factories, cities, farms, and people. Millions of people from different places, cultures, beliefs, and backgrounds. People who work together, build together, vote, speak freely, worship freely. Mike has something valuable, something fragile. He has America. And there are those who would gladly take it from him. Not with force, but with words.
I happen to know the facts. Now, friends, I'm just an average American. But I'm an American, and some of the things I see in this country of ours make my blood boil. I see people with foreign money. I see Negroes holding jobs that belong to me and you. Now, I ask you, if we allow this thing to go on, what's going to become of us real Americans?
I've heard this kind of talk before, but I never expected to hear it in America.
This fellow seems to know what he's talking about.
What are we real Americans going to do about it? You'll find it right here in this little pamphlet. The truth about Negroes and foreigners. The truth about the Catholic Church.
Do you believe in that kind of talk?
I don't know, makes pretty good sense to me.
And I tell you, friends, we'll never be able to call this country our own until it's a country without. Without what? Yeah, without what? Without Negroes. Without alien foreigners. Without Catholics. Without Freemasons. You know
Masons? What's wrong with the Masons? I'm a Mason. Hey, that fellow's talking about me.
And that makes a difference, doesn't it?
These are your enemies. These are the people who are trying to take over our country. Now you know them. You know what they stand for. And it's up to you and me to fight them. Fight them and destroy them before they destroy us. Thank you.
Before he said Masons, you were ready to agree with him.
Well, yes, but he was talking about... What about those other people?
But in this country, we have no other people. We are American people, us.
What about you? You aren't American, are you?
I was born in Hungary, but now I am an American citizen. And I have seen what this kind of talk can do. I saw it in Berlin.
What were you doing there?
I was a professor at the university. I heard the same words we have heard today. But I was a fool then. I thought Nazis were crazy people, stupid fanatics. But unfortunately, it was not so. You see, they knew that they were not strong enough to conquer a unified country. So they split Germany into small groups. They used prejudice as a practical weapon to cripple the nation. Of course, that was not easy to do. They had to work hard to do it. You see, we human beings are not born with prejudices. Always they are made for us, made by someone who wants something. Remember that when you hear this kind of talk. Somebody's going to get something out of it, and it isn't going to be you. This is not classroom theory. I saw it happen. I saw it first in Berlin in 1932. 5 young men that I knew were standing in the crowd listening to the Nazi speaker. Eric was a Catholic. Anton, a student of mine, was a Jew. Heinrich owned a small hardware store. Karl was a farmer. And Hans was an unemployed metal worker.
To all Aryan Germans, I say it is time you inherited the nation which rightfully belongs to you. To you alone belongs the glorious destiny of the greater Germany. The Nazi Party will provide land for the farmer, work for the worker, and profits for the small businessman. Who is getting these things now? The Jew. The Jew who has stolen our nation and our birthright. Who makes all the money and takes all our jobs? The Jew! He must be shunned. He must be ostracized. He must be eliminated. And the Catholics. We don't want our great nation run by a foreign church. We Germans will know what to do with these people when the time comes. They and their faith must be destroyed. Then there are the Freemasons. In Germany, we have no place for secret societies. There will be only one society, and that is the Nazi Party. There will be no secrecy about that in the new greater Germany.
One by one.
One by one, he turned people against each other. Groups that once stood side by side were separated, divided, and set into conflict. They arrived as fellow Germans, but they left as rivals, suspicious, fearful, and full of hatred. All of them were being deceived, but the one who was fooled the most was Hans. By Nazi standards, Hans was pure, and because of that, they promised him everything. He believed them. That was how Hans became what they called a Superman. They gave him a uniform. They fed his pride. They gave him a sense of power. He was no longer an unemployed man with nothing. He was told he belonged to the master race. Hans, and thousands like him, were all playing the same dangerous game. They gambled with the freedom of others, and in the end, they lost their own. A nation of people who had been used. Hitler needed men like this. There was work to be done. Trade unions had to be destroyed, because organized workers could resist. Political parties had to be erased, because unity outside the party was dangerous. Every organization where people could stand together was crushed. Jews were beaten and killed, not because they were powerful, but because they were a convenient target for blame. Catholics were imprisoned because the church still had the strength to speak against power. Piece by piece, the nation was broken apart, and once divided, each piece was destroyed. From these fragments, the Nazis rose to absolute power. One party, one nation, one belief. They had won control of Germany. But even then, they faced their greatest enemy, the truth. Truth does not die easily, so they tried to erase it. Books were burned, millions of them. Writers, teachers, scientists, anyone who spoke the truth was jailed or forced to flee. Education was discouraged. In just 5 years, university attendance fell by more than half. Listening to foreign radio was forbidden. Reading foreign newspapers was forbidden. There was only one voice allowed, and it told people what was best for them. The church was one of the last forces still able to speak openly, so priests were arrested, accused, silenced. Protestant leaders were imprisoned, educators were sent to camps. Yet even then, some still spoke for the truth, and that too made them dangerous.
And what, may I ask, is an Aryan? I don't know myself. But let us see what our present so-called authorities have to say about it. They say he is tall, slender, blue-eyed, and blonde. There is no Aryan race. And more important, there is no master race. There are people who may find these ideas convenient, but science cannot support them. There is no scientific proof that there's any correlation between a man's racial characteristics and his native ability or character. In all racial groups, we find the same range of potentialities. We find idiots and geniuses. We find criminals and philanthropists. We must judge each man as an individual and not by the color of his skin or his eyes or by the length of his nose. Come in, gentlemen. It's comfortable. And remember that there is no master race. That is a scientific truth. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
So for all practical purposes, truth was finished. In Germany, truth no longer existed. Many of my German friends later asked themselves the same questions. How did this happen? Where did it begin? It began right here, and this was the moment when it still could have been stopped. If people had stood together, if they had protected one another, they could have resisted. United, they would have been strong. But once they allowed themselves to be divided, they became powerless. When the first minority was destroyed, everyone lost. They made one fatal mistake. They gambled with other people's freedom. Now let us see how those bets turned out. Carl, the farmer, believed he was betting on a better life. What he received instead was endless labor, sometimes more than 100 hours a week. He was chained to his land, forced to produce whatever the state demanded, because Germany was preparing for war. Heinrich, the small shop owner, fared no better. In just 2 years, over 100,000 small businesses were shut down. And Hans gained nothing at all. He now had a job in a munitions factory, but he worked longer hours for less pay. Conditions grew worse and worse. Even when he wanted to leave, he was not allowed to. And when Hitler decided the moment had come, Germany went to war. Not with an honest declaration, but through a carefully planned surprise attack. Once again, Hitler needed Hans. This time, to do his most brutal work. Hans became skilled in violence, and Hitler used him against other nations, the Czechs, the Poles, the French, the Russians. But when the true test came, the race theories failed. The so-called pure-blooded supermen were defeated by the armies they despised, defeated by the British at El Alamein, defeated by the Russians at Stalingrad, and finally, on D-Day, by American soldiers of every color and religion who stormed the beaches of Normandy and pushed all the way into Germany. For the Germans who swallowed the Nazi promises, the gamble ended in disaster. Europe was left covered with millions of German bodies, the bodies of those who were told they were superior. Karl, the farmer, lay frozen in the snow outside Moscow. Heinrich never returned from Italy. And Hans, the man who was promised the world, ended with nothing more than a small piece of land in Normandy to call his own.
We must never let that happen to us or to our country. We must never let ourselves be divided by race or color or religion, because in this country we all belong to minority groups. I was born in Hungary. You are a Mason. These are minorities. And then you belong to other minority groups too. You are a farmer. You have blue. You go to the Methodist Church. Your right to belong to these minorities is a precious thing. You have a right to be what you are and say what you think, because here we have personal freedom. We have liberty. And these are not just fancy words. This is a practical and priceless way of living. But we must work at it. We must guard everyone's liberty, or we can lose our own. If we allow any minority to lose its freedom by persecution or by prejudice, we are threatening our own freedom. And this is not simply an ideal. This is good, hard common sense. You see, here in America is not a question whether we tolerate minorities. America is minorities. And that means you and me. So let's not be suckers.
So let us not be fools. We must never allow the freedom or dignity of any person to be threatened by words, by fear, or by hate. Be selfish about it. Because when someone else's freedom is taken away, your own is already at risk. Forget about us versus them. There is only us.